castles. They've long been symbols of power and wealth, but some take things to an entirely new level. From intricate designs and opulent interiors to jaw-dropping fortifications, these castles are absolute masterpieces. Join me, we're going to explore 15 of the most elaborate castles ever built, each with its own fascinating story. Number 15. Peña Palace in Portugal. Set high in the hills of Sintra, the Peña Palace is one of Portugal's most famous landmarks and a stunning example of 19th century romanticism. This fairy tale castle blends Gothic, Moorish, and Renaissance styles in a way that's unlike anything else you'll see. And this stunning design is only further enhanced by the surrounding mountains, making it clear why this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The origins of this palace can be traced back to a small chapel that was dedicated to Our Lady of Peña in the Middle Ages. By the 16th century, King Manuel I turned the site into a monastery for the Order of St. Jerome. This monastery stood for centuries, as it was nearly destroyed in the Lisbon earthquake of 1755, and then after that it lay in ruin until Ferdinand II, a German prince who married Queen Maria II of Portugal in 1836, decided to revive it. Fascinated by the Romantic movement that was sweeping Europe at the time, Ferdinand dreamt of a place that honored Portugal's rich history and cultural influences. Work on the palace began in 1842 under the supervision of German architect Wilhelm Ludwig von Eschwege. The design took on the Romantic notion of blending nature and art, creating a structure that looked like it had sprung up naturally from a hilltop. While it is mainly known as a romantic retreat, its high position also made it an excellent lookout over the Lisbon region. During times of political unrest, it served as a secure refuge for the royal family, and Ferdinand II purposefully blended its design styles to reflect Portugal's rich history and global connections. Number 14. Matsumoto Castle in Japan. The stunning Matsumoto Castle, which is in Japan's Nagano Prefecture, is one of the most historically important castles in the country. Known as the Crow Castle because of its black exterior, it's one of the few remaining original castles in Japan, with many others having been destroyed during wars, times of upheaval, or fires. Work on this one began in 1504 during the Eisho period, and it was greatly expanded in the late 16th century under the rule of the Ogasawara and then the Ishikawa clans. Unlike hilltop castles that are common in Japan, Matsumoto Castle is a flatland castle and was built on a plain and then surrounded by moats and fortified walls. This location made it easier to defend while allowing for better access to local resources and transportation routes. The main keep, or tenshu, is a 6-story structure with 5 visible levels, which is a purposeful design that was meant to deceive attackers about its true height. The interiors of the castle feature steep wooden stairs, low ceilings, and narrow windows designed for archers and gunners. One of the more unusual features here, though, is its moon viewing room, or tsukimiyagura, which was built during the Edo period, when the emphasis changed from warfare to cultural activities. Well, despite its beauty and importance, Matsumoto Castle faced the threat of demolition during the Meiji Restoration, when many castles were dismantled as symbols of feudal rule. Thanks to the efforts of local citizens who raised funds to preserve it, the castle was spared and later declared a national treasure in 1952. Today, visitors can explore it, learn about the samurai era through exhibits of weapon and armor, and climb to the top for views of the city and the mountains. Number 13. Scalagero Castle in Italy. Scalagero Castle is a fortress that's on the southern shores of Lake Garda in Sirmione in Italy. This medieval castle is one of the best preserved examples of military architecture from the Scaliger dynasty, who ruled over Verona and much of northern Italy during the 13th and 14th centuries. Construction of this castle began in the mid-13th century under Mastino I della Scala, a member of the powerful Scaliger family. Its main purpose was to protect Sirmione, which was a strategic point for controlling Lake Garda and the surrounding trade routes. Now, unusually, this fortress is surrounded by water on nearly all sides, as it's built on a narrow peninsula that sticks out into the lake. This natural moat of sorts, combined with the castle's fortified walls and tower, made it almost impenetrable. The drawbridge and portcullis were the main access points, ensuring that the entry could be strictly controlled, and still, today, you need to cross the drawbridge to enter the castle. As for its architecture, it is a blend of functionality and elegance. Its rectangular shape is surrounded by tall, crenellated walls and 4 corner towers, each offering views of the lake and landscape. Inside the castle is a large courtyard that was once used for military drills and gatherings, and one unique thing about this castle is that it has an enclosed harbor, which was a medieval dockyard that would have provided shelter for fleets. Over time, the castle has served various purposes, and following the fall of the Scaliger family, it was used as a military outpost under Venetian, French, and Austrian control. In modern times, of course, there's no further need for its defensive capabilities, and it's been carefully restored and turned into a museum and tourist attraction. Number 12. The Gyeongsi-dong Castle in Tibet. Gyeongsi-dong, also known as the Gyeongsi Fortress or Gyeongsi Castle, is one of Tibet's most important landmarks. Sat on a rocky hill overlooking the town of Gyeongsi in southern Tibet, its origins can be traced back to the 14th century, when it was built during the reign of King Pakpa Pelzangpo. Its location, with views of the Nangchu Valley, made it an important military outpost, but as well as being a defensive stronghold, it was also a center for trade, as it was on the old trade routes that linked Tibet with India and Bhutan. In 1904, it was the site of a defense against British forces during the Yangshuban expedition. The Tibetan army, with outdated weapons, made a stand against a technologically superior force, and the scars of this battle, including the cannonball damage, can still be seen on the fortress walls. Architecturally, Gyeongsi-dong is a combination of military needs and Tibetan aesthetics. Its multi-tiered design follows the natural contours of the hill, with walls and structures built into the landscape. And the steep climb to the top leads to views of the surrounding valley, the town, and the nearby Palcho Monastery. Today, Gyeongsi-dong is a popular destination for travelers wanting to learn more about Tibet's history and culture, beyond its more famous landmarks. And there's a small museum that displays artifacts from the region's past, including weapons, designs, documents, and photographs related to the 1904 battle. Number 11. Palace of the Kings of Navarre of Olite, Spain. The Palace of the Kings of Navarre of Olite, also known as Palacio Real de Olite, is a spectacular medieval castle that's in the town of Olite in northern Spain's Navarre region. Now, having got all that name stuff out of the way, it's famous because of its fairy tale-like appearance, and this palace was one of the most luxurious royal residences in medieval Europe, with towering spires, delicate stoneworks, and a sprawling layout. The palace was mainly built during the reign of King Charles III of Navarre in the late 14th and early 15th centuries, who wanted a residence that would show off the power and sophistication of the kingdom, but also one that could be a defensive stronghold if needed. He hired some of the best architects, artists, and artisans of the time who took inspiration from Gothic and Moorish styles and blended them into a design that was opulent and functional. All of the towers have their own distinct shape and function. The Tower of the Four Winds and the Tower of the Homage, for example, are the ones that stand out the most, not just for their height, but because of how intricate the design is. From them, you can see unobstructed views of the surrounding countryside, including vineyards that produce the region's famous wines. It hosted grand banquets, tournaments, and diplomatic meetings, attracting artists, writers, and dignitaries from across Europe. Charles III's reign, though, was relatively peaceful and prosperous, so it was really never tested as a fortress. Following the annexation of Navarre by the Kingdom of Castile in the 16th century, part of the palace fell into disrepair and was further damaged during the Peninsular War in the early 19th century. Despite all this, though, its ruins captured the imagination of romantic artists and writers, ensuring that it was never forgotten. And in the 20th century, extensive restoration efforts brought it back to its former glory. Today, it's a historical monument and a tourist attraction, offering guided tours that delve into its past, and where you'll be able to explore its grand halls, climb its towers, and walk through its reconstructed gardens. Number 10. Bonice Castle in Slovakia. Bonice Castle, which can be found in the beautiful town of Bonice in Slovakia, is one of Central Europe's most impressive castles. With a fairy tale appearance, complete with towers, turrets, and romantic surroundings, it's often referred to as the Jewel of Slovakia. Work on the structure began in the 12th century, but at that time it was built as a wooden fortification. Over the centuries, it would undergo significant transformations, and by the 13th century, it had been completely rebuilt in stone, at which point it had become a towering medieval stronghold. The most significant changes to the castle took place in the late 19th and early 20th centuries under Count János Pálffy, who was an aristocrat with a great love of art and history. Inspired by his travels through France and Italy, he wanted it to mirror the romantic chateau of the Loire Valley. To do this, he began a huge renovation project, blending elements of Gothic, Renaissance, and Romantic architecture to create the castle's current appearance. It's the tall towers and spires that give it that impressive shape, but inside, this extravagance is continued with rooms that have ornate ceilings, tapestries, and original furniture. The Golden Hall is particularly special, with a gilded ceiling and a Renaissance design that takes you back to the best of the Romantic era. The castle's chapel, with its stunning stained glass windows, also became the spiritual center of the town. Surrounding the castle, there's a landscaped park that includes ancient lime trees, some of which are over 600 years old. And beneath the structure, there's a network of caves and travertine rock formations that are part of a natural karst system and were integrated into the castle's design. With so much history, it's perhaps no surprise that Bonice Castle has become associated with legends and ghost stories, one of the most famous tales being about a hidden treasure that's said to be buried within the grounds. Another legend speaks of a white lady who's a well-meaning spirit that's said to roam the halls. And for the thousands of people who visit this place each year, there's always the hope that they may too get a glimpse of her. Number 9. Hluboka Castle in the Czech Republic. Hluboka Castle is in the South Bohemian region of the Czech Republic, and it's one of the most stunning and romantic castles in the whole country. It looks surprisingly similar to England's Windsor Castle, which has earned it the nickname Czech Windsor, and is popular for its fairy tale-like appearance and its rich history. The site was first developed as far back as the 13th century when it was developed as a Gothic stronghold. Originally, it was constructed as a defensive fortress. Its location overlooking the river made it an important military and administrative center. Over the centuries, the castle has changed hands countless times, and as is common, each successive owner made changes that reflected their own particular tastes and style. It underwent several major transformations too, transitioning from a medieval Gothic structure to a Renaissance residence, and then later incorporating Baroque elements. The castle's exterior is a great example of Romantic Gothic revival architecture with its white facade, crenellated towers, and intricate details. It's got an asymmetrical design with turrets, battlements, and a grand entrance gate, and the surrounding landscape is full of meticulously maintained gardens, sprawling lawns, and walking paths. The interiors of the castle have been kept how the Schwarzenberg family designed them and exude wealth and refined taste. You can explore over 140 rooms, each featuring incredible woodwork, decorated ceilings, and a huge collection of art and furnishings. The Knights Hall is a highlight, with its coffered ceiling and grand fireplace, and the castle library too is a special place, with thousands of rare books in beautifully carved oak shelves. As well as redesigning it, the Schwarzenbergs added to the castle with an enormous art collection. Many of these works include paintings, tapestries, and porcelain. They're on display with some of the finest examples of European art and craftsmanship. Today, the castle is one of the Czech Republic's most visited landmarks, drawing tourists from around the world. It hosts guided tours, events, and exhibitions that reach into its history and the legacy of the Schwarzenberg family. Number 8. De Haar Castle in the Netherlands. De Haar Castle is in the province of Utrecht in the Netherlands. It's one of the largest and most opulent castles in the country. Known for its fairy tale appearance, romantic gardens, and deep history, De Haar Castle has a blend of medieval charm with modern luxury. It was first built in the 14th century as a medieval fortress, and it was certainly needed at the time. During these years, it was involved in a number of conflicts, as it occupied the location in the heart of the country. Over centuries, the castle was damaged during wars, fires, and, of course, neglect, and this left it in ruins by the late 18th century. Things were turned around, though, in the late 19th century, when the wealthy Van Zuyland family who owned the estate decided to restore the castle to its former glory. The transformation of the castle into what we see today began in 1892. A famous Dutch architect best known for designing an Amsterdam Central Station, Kuipers took an ambitious restoration project blending medieval elements with modern innovations and created the opulence associated with the Rothschild family's vast wealth. Inside, the castle's lavishly decorated rooms with stained glass windows, wood paneling, and ornate furnishings are typical of the grandeur of the late 19th century. The castle grounds are just as spectacular, covering over 135 acres of meticulously landscaped gardens, canals, and wooded areas. The formal French gardens with symmetrical designs and vibrant flower beds sit alongside natural English-style parklands, allowing visitors to stroll through tree-lined avenues, admire the ornamental fountains, and discover hidden little nooks. Throughout the 20th century, De Haar Castle became a social center of sorts for high society, with the Van Zuyland family hosting grand receptions and parties that were attended by royalty, celebrities, and leading figures from around the world, including Coco Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent, and Brigitte Bardot. Today, while these parties no longer take place, it's now open to the public as a museum where you can explore, learn about its history, and go to events such as medieval fairs, concerts, and exhibitions. Moving on to number 7, Peles Castle in Romania. Peles Castle is in the scenic Carpathian Mountains in Romania and is one of Europe's most well-known castles. By the late 19th century, it served as a summer residence for Romania's royal family, and it remains a symbol of the country's culture and architectural heritage. It's got a neo-Renaissance design, and with incredible surroundings and lavish interiors, it is a must-see place for those who love history, art, and anyone wanting to take a look into the grandeur that's typical of royal residences. The story of Peles Castle begins in 1866 when Carol I, the first king of Romania, rose to the throne. Entranced by the natural beauty of the Prahova Valley, he chose the area near the mountain resort town of Sinaia as the site for his summer residence. Construction of the castle began in 1873, with the foundation stone laid in 1875. It was finally completed in 1914, and it became one of the most modern royal residences of its time. The castle was equipped with cutting-edge technology, including central heating, electricity, and even a central vacuuming system, which was highly unusual. The architecture of the castle is a blend of European styles, including Renaissance, Gothic Revival, and Baroque, with an exterior that's covered with intricate woodwork, balconies, and towers that rise against the backdrop of the forested mountains. The central tower, which is 217 feet or 66 meters tall, offers amazing views of the surrounding area. The interiors of the castle are truly on another level, though. With more than 170 rooms, each space is uniquely decorated to show different styles and cultural influences. The Hall of Honor, for example, with its wood carvings and stained glass ceilings, evokes a sense of amazement and grandeur, while the Armory Room houses an impressive collection of over 4,000 weapons and suits of armor from Europe and Asia. But one of the more surprising things in the castle is its private theater, complete with a royal box and an early version of a cinematic projector. And its library is one of a kind too, with hidden doors and rare manuscripts that show how central this place was to entertainment and intellectual pursuits. Following the abdication of King Michael I in 1947 and the establishment of the communist regime, the castle was confiscated and turned into a museum. And then, after the fall of communism, it was returned to the Romanian royal family, but it remains open to the public as a cultural landmark. Number 6. Vianden Castle in Luxembourg. Vianden Castle, which is on top of a hill overlooking the town of Vianden in northern Luxembourg, is one of the finest examples of Romanesque and Gothic architecture that you'll find anywhere in Europe. The origins of the castle date back to the 10th century, when a Roman fort was turned into a Carolingian refuge. By the 11th century, the Counts of Vianden, one of the most powerful noble families in the region, then began constructing the castle that stands today. Over the next 3 centuries, the castle was expanded and renovated, incorporating elements of Romanesque, Gothic, and Renaissance styles. At its height, the castle was a seat of power and prestige. The Counts of Vianden, who were related to influential European families such as the House of Nassau and the Holy Roman Emperor, ruled vast territories that extended into present-day Germany, Belgium, and France. It feels powerful from the moment you see the towers, fortified walls, and elegant halls. The chapel, which was built in a Romanesque style, is an impressive feature too, with a 2-story design that allows for both private worship by the nobility and public ceremonies. The Knights' Hall, with a vaulted ceiling and intricate detailing, reminds of the castle's function as a center of feudal life, hosting banquets, court proceedings, and celebrations. The Great Hall, which was added in the Gothic period, is just as impressive, and it represents the transition to more elaborate decorative architecture. The castle began to decline in the 17th century when the Counts of Vianden lost their influence, so by the 18th century it was abandoned and sold piece by piece, leaving it in a state of ruin. The turning point came in the 19th century when the castle's state caught the attention of Victor Hugo, the French author, who spent time in Vianden and campaigned for its preservation. In the 20th century, the castle was restored to its former glory through extensive reconstruction efforts, and today it stands as an example of the meticulous work of historians and architects who wanted to preserve its historical integrity. The annual medieval festival, featuring jousting tournaments, artisan demonstrations, and period music, is a fun event that takes the castle back to its heyday and brings its past to life in an interactive way. Number 5. Castillo de Chapultepec, Mexico. Castillo de Chapultepec, or Chapultepec Castle, is a historic site that's on top of Chapultepec Hill in Mexico City. How many times do I have to say Chapultepec? It is the only royal castle in the Americas, making it a unique and significant part of Mexico's history. And with stunning architecture, beautiful surroundings, and panoramic views of the capital, it's one of the most visited landmarks in the country. Construction on it first began in 1785, during the Spanish colonial period. Now, it was originally intended to be a summer retreat for the Spanish viceroys. This castle was designed in a neoclassical style by military engineer Francisco Bambitelli. The location on Chapultepec Hill, which was a site that was revered by the Aztecs as a sacred place, added huge symbolic importance to the structure. The castle gained new life in the 19th century, though, as after Mexico's independence in 1821, it was briefly used as a military academy, with it playing a central role in the Battle of Chapultepec during the Mexican-American War in 1847. Now, this battle was a defining moment in Mexican history, as a small group of young cadets, known as the Niños Heroes, or the Boy Heroes, fought valiantly against the invading U.S. forces, and there's a monument to them near the castle, cementing its place as a beacon of national resilience. Eventually, the addition of ornate gardens, a grand staircase, and luxurious interiors reflected the opulence of the Habsburg monarchy, but ultimately Maximilian and Carlota's stay at the castle was short-lived. Their reign ended with the fall of the Second Mexican Empire in 1867. Their legacy would, though, leave a lasting mark on the castle's character. After the fall of the empire, Chapultepec Castle was turned into a presidential residence, becoming the home of Mexico's heads of state until 1939. During this period, it was a symbol of government power and prestige. Today, Chapultepec Castle is home to a vast collection of artifacts, art, and documents that chart Mexico's history from pre-Columbian times to the 20th century. Visitors can explore decorated rooms including Maximilian and Carlota's quarters, filled with period furniture, tapestries, and paintings. The museum here, too, also features exhibits on Mexican independence, the Reform period, and the Mexican Revolution, providing a comprehensive overview of the country's past. Number 4. Castle of Fontainebleau. The Castle of Fontainebleau, which is about 34 miles to the southeast of Paris, is one of France's most famous royal residences. A symbol of history and culture, it is one of the few French castles to have been continuously lived in by monarchs for over 7 centuries. Taking its name from the Fontaine Belleau, which is a natural freshwater spring that's nearby, it dates back to the 12th century, when it was initially built as a hunting lodge for French kings. Its location in a thick forest made it an ideal retreat for royalty, and then over the centuries the modest lodge was transformed into a grand palace under the direction of successive monarchs, each leaving their own mark on its design. The castle underwent its first significant transformation during the reign of Francis I in the 16th century. A patron of the arts and a key figure of the French Renaissance, Francis wanted to create a place that was as grand and opulent as his court. He commissioned Italian artists to redesign the castle in a Renaissance style, and the result was a blend of French and Italian influences. Fontainebleau's role as a center of royal power continued into the 17th century under the reign of Louis XIV, the Sun King. Although Louis preferred the Palace of Versailles, he expanded the gardens and added the Grand Parterre, the largest formal garden in Europe at the time. In the 18th century, Napoleon Bonaparte would then play a role in the history of the castle. After declaring himself emperor, he used the castle as a residence and administrative center, and oversaw renovations that reflected his imperial ambitions. Napoleon also used it as a site of his abdication in 1814, marking a major chapter in both his life and the castle's history. In 1927, it was turned into a museum, and it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1981. Today, the museum has expanded to cover the life of Napoleon, French royal history, and much more, making it a lesser-known but a popular tourist attraction to this day. Number 3. Amber Fort in India. Amber Fort, also known as Amir Fort, is on a hilltop overlooking Mauta Lake near Jaipur in Rajasthan in India. It is a stunning example of Rajput architecture, blending Hindu and Mughal styles in its design. And because of its cultural importance and breathtaking location, it's one of the most visited and celebrated monuments in India, earning its designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Amber Fort was first built in 1592 by Raja Man Singh I, who was a trusted general in the Mughal Emperor Akbar's court. Throughout Amber Fort, you'll see intricate design and artistic mastery, constructed from red sandstone and white marble. The fort is a wonderful blend of solidity and elegance. The entrance, the Suraj Pol or Sun Gate, leads to the large Jalab Chowk, which is a courtyard where armies would assemble after their victories. This area has also housed stables and quarters for soldiers. One of the fort's most impressive features is the Ganesh Pole, which is an ornately decorated gateway that leads to the private palaces of the royals. The gateway is decorated with incredible frescoes and mosaics, showing the skill of the Rajasthani artisans. Above Ganesh Pole lies the Sukhag Mandir, which is a small chamber where royal women would be able to watch ceremonies in privacy through latticed windows. The highlight, though, has to be the Sheesh Mahal, or the Mirror Palace, which is a breathtaking room that's covered in intricate mirrors. The walls and ceiling are inlaid with mirrors and colored glass, and this creates a dazzling effect even with just a single candle in the room. Another popular room was the Sukniwas, or the Hall of Pleasure, which features a clever cooling system whereby a series of water channels and perforated marble panels allow cool air to circulate around and provided respite from Rajasthan's intense heat. Having, through history, served as the setting for festivals, celebrations, and courtly rituals that defined the opulence of the Rajput courts, it is, even today, a focal point for Rajasthani culture. And if you visit, you'll be able to see the Amber Sound and Light Show, which is held in the evenings and tells the history of the fort and its rulers. Number 2. The Forbidden City in China. The Forbidden City, which is in the center of Beijing in China, is one of the world's most famous historic landmarks. Once the imperial palace for the Ming and Qing dynasties, it's a sprawling complex that covers a site of over 180 acres. And it served as the political and ceremonial center of China for just over 500 years, from 1420 to 1924. Today, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and an enduring symbol of China's rich cultural heritage. The construction of the Forbidden City began in 1406. It was completed in 1420 following 14 years of planning and a workforce made up of more than 1 million people. The palace was designed following Feng Shui principles, ensuring harmony between its layout and the surrounding natural environment. And materials such as golden bricks, marbles from Hebei, and precious wood from China's southern forests were used, showing its importance as the residence of the Son of Heaven. Architecturally, the Forbidden City is a masterpiece of Chinese palatial design. It's made up of 980 surviving buildings and over 8,700 rooms arranged symmetrically along a central axis. The complex is surrounded by a 33-foot or 10-meter-high wall and a wide moat, emphasizing its role as a protected and exclusive space. The buildings are made mainly of wood and are painted red and gold, which are colors that symbolize prosperity and power in Chinese culture. The city is divided into 2 main sections, the outer court and the inner court. The outer court, which is located in the southern part, was used for ceremonial purposes and important halls such as the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the largest wooden structure in China, and the site of imperial coronations and grand ceremonies. The inner court, located in the northern part, was the residential area for the emperor and his family. This section includes the Palace of Heavenly Purity and the Palace of Earthly Tranquility, which symbolize the yin-yang balance in imperial life. The Forbidden City is rich in cultural symbolism, so for example the number 9, representing the ultimate power, is clear in the design, from the 9 rows of golden studs on the palace doors to the 9 mythical dragon motifs on the roof. The dragon, a symbol of imperial authority, is also a recurring theme throughout the complex. In 1912, the Forbidden City stopped being an imperial palace with the abdication of the Emperor Puyi, the last emperor of China, and in 1925 it was transformed into the Palace Museum, opening its gates to the public for the first time in history. Today, the museum houses over 1.8 million artifacts, including imperial treasures, ancient paintings, ceramics, and jade, which are a fascinating way to learn about Chinese history and culture. Number 1. Windsor Castle in the UK. Of course, it had to be Windsor Castle in the historic town of Windsor in Berkshire, England. It's the oldest and largest inhabited castle in the world. Being the symbol of British royalty for nearly 1,000 years, it served as both a fortress and a royal residence since it was built by William the Conqueror in the 11th century. With its architecture, rich history, and ongoing role in the monarchy, Windsor Castle is one of the most iconic landmarks in the United Kingdom. William the Conqueror originally established it as part of a series of fortifications that were designed to secure Norman control over England. It's built on a hill overlooking the River Thames. The original castle was a wooden Motte and Bailey structure, and this location was chosen because of its defensive potential. During the reign of Henry II in the 12th century, the wooden structure was replaced with stone, including the construction of the Round Tower, which remains one of the castle's most well-known features. One of the biggest transformations took place under Edward III in the 14th century. Edward, who was born at Windsor, had a strong emotional connection to the castle and began its redevelopment into a grand Gothic palace. This included the construction of St. George's Chapel, an example of perpendicular Gothic architecture that remains a centerpiece of the complex, also which became the spiritual home to the Order of the Garter, which is England's highest order of chivalry and was founded by Edward in 1348. Surprisingly though, Windsor Castle's role as a royal residence was only really solidified in the 19th century under Queen Victoria, who made it her main home. She and Prince Albert expanded the castle's functions, hosting state visits, banquets, and other royal events there. And it was during this time that Windsor became a focal point for British national identity. The castle has continued to evolve in the modern era and even played a critical role during the Second World War, when it became a fortified safe haven for the royal family because of its secure location. It did, though, suffer a devastating fire in 1992, which destroyed over 100 rooms, although extensive restoration efforts have now managed to return it to its former glory. Today, the Windsor Castle remains a working royal residence, but it's also a major tourist attraction. It's a weekend retreat for the reigning monarch when they choose to use it, as well as a venue for state banquets, royal weddings, and other ceremonial events. Most recently, though, it was the site of the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in 2018. While there are, of course, many places that are off-limits, visitors to Windsor Castle can explore some of its rooms, including the state apartments, which feature an extraordinary collection of art, tapestries, and furniture. Highlights include works by artists such as Rembrandt and Rubens, as well as the Waterloo Chamber, celebrating the victory over Napoleon, and the semi-state rooms used by George IV, showcasing some of the most lavish decorations in the castle. Thanks for staying with me, kings and queens. I'll see you next time.